This is the Motherlands podcast. The intention of this podcast is to provide evidence-based information through honest conversations on fertility, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and beyond by bridging together the two worlds of allopathic medicine and holistic practices to improve the reproductive health outcomes of women. I am your host, Keely Semler. Hi, welcome back to the Motherlands podcast. As we begin to wind down for the year, I wanted to let you know that Motherlands will be taking a hiatus in order to honor the slow season with the holidays, as well as make space for something very exciting that will be arriving next year. I cannot wait to share more details with you, but for now, I hope you enjoy the final episodes of Motherlands, and I look forward to having more special guests next year. And while we're on the topic of making space, our guest today is Cassandra Ogier. She is a mother to 3 adult men, and she founded an incredible company called The Reflective Horse, which allows people the opportunity to have a life-altering experience in the company of horses. Cassandra helps people learn about the nature of horses, how they occupy and claim space can teach us about our own nature as humans. The profound message that I received while working with the horses is the idea that how we lead with our energy very much has a reaction from nature, which is empowering because that means I have a say in how nature responds to me, and subsequently, how human beings respond to me. Cassandra shares about her journey into early motherhood and finding her confidence as a parent. In many ways, her experience as a mother has been about going against the grain and forming an alliance with her intuition. We also explore the significance of a mare within a herd of horses. A mare is a leading female whom all the other horses look to for direction and protection. It makes me reflect on the leading women in my life. Cassandra and I have been toying around with the idea of facilitating a group with the horses for women sometime next year. If you would like to learn more about this opportunity to encounter Cassandra's work with horses during your transition into becoming a mother, you can visit the show notes and drop your email to receive details about this offering as they come together. If you enjoy this episode, please like and leave a review, as I'm told this is the best way for people to find us. Also, Parallel Health has generously offered Motherlands listeners a discount on all of their high-quality supplements. You can enjoy 20% off your order with code MOTHERLANDS at checkout. Thank you again for being here. Your presence in listening to these conversations is felt and deeply appreciated. I'll see you again soon. Oh, it's so good to see you.
Great to see you. Did Paula tell you that we hung out?
Yeah, I just interviewed her for the podcast, so it's really fitting that you're next because we totally talked about you. And yeah, I think it's just a perfect flow to be able to share with you and to hear from you and to share with listeners really about the work that you do with humans and horses.
Yeah, and I love the parenting questions too, and there's so many similarities.
Yes, there are.
Really.
I'm hoping you can start with sharing with listeners a bit about your background, who you are, how you work with people and horses, and maybe weaving in your journey of becoming a mother, if that's at all possible. Whatever you feel open to sharing.
Yeah. Your podcast is about mothering, right?
It is. And I think because I'm a doula and an educator, it just so happens that I have invited podcast guests that happen to be mothers. But it's not exclusively for mothers per se. But yes, I love the verb of that, mothering.
Yeah, mothering. And I think that is what I can bring into all of it, because in many ways that's kind of what it's not mothering, but it's that holding that very neutral space and that, seeing of people's perfection, I guess, and people's wholeness. And that's pretty much what I did with my mothering, and that's what I do with people that I work with. So
Can you share about what led you into your work with horses? And
yeah.
to be fair, for listeners, what you do is very unique and very, very special. And I just feel really grateful that you can share about it because I have personally been so moved by the work that you offer. So I think for people who might be hearing your voice for the first time, it might be helpful just to share some context.
Yes. And it's so beautiful. I can really see you in that space with the horses that we shared, however many years ago that was now. I can also see your transition, how you've changed and how you've expanded and elevated, which is really, really cool. But yeah, I always say this, that horses really saved me, when I was growing up. And I had just unclarity and trauma related to the humans in my life when I was growing up, one particular one. And so my childhood experience was just so against everything that I purely needed as a child. It just wasn't a great beginning. There was a horse, it was actually a donkey that lived down the road from us. I guess I was 4. And I would walk down the road away from an environment that was, held a lot of heaviness and untruth. I would totter down the road, I suppose, to this donkey who looked huge to me. And we built a relationship. And nobody in my family could remember. They were like, oh, yeah, there was a donkey down the road. Yeah. It was this kind of totally personal experience that I had with this donkey over a couple of years. And all I remember was this relationship based on us communicating and us being in this space together, in this field together. And somehow or other, at some point, I managed to get on his back and he would walk from the back of the field where there was somewhere where I could climb on to the gate. And there was no halters or ropes or anything like that. And I absolutely think that is what grounded me. That was something that was a true relationship that I could really, really feel. And I built trust through that relationship. I mean, that relationship was entirely built on trust, which was not my experience with humans. As growing up, it's a longer story, but, in context, as I grew up and moved away from, being in the city, I had the great opportunity of spending a lot of time in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, which is a small island in between France and England. And when I got there at about the age of 8, I was in heaven because I was able to, cycle down to the farm and, have riding lessons and muck out horses and be in that environment and be in that freedom, actually. Don't get me wrong, I had wonderful, really, great parents, but I was very rebellious and needed a lot of freedom. And they actually did give me that. Really didn't get on that well at school. I went to college eventually, but, really didn't like school, really didn't get on with that, and ended up working with horses when I was a teenager, just developing my confidence through horses and nature. So that, was my kind of formative years of being with horses. And then I gained a lot of confidence and changed my trajectory and ended up working in the film industry for about 10 years in casting. So putting actors in things, in England. That was kind of interesting because, this word that we pulled out, mothering, it was very creative, but also I feel that with actors, it's such an insecure profession. There's so many doubts and, potentially people can take the rejections that they receive very, very personally. So I felt that within the work that I did, which is super interesting looking back on it and being like able to see people's kind of gifts or, where they really shine and putting them in a role, but also to really buoy them, really love them, be like, you don't need to take this personally. The director is, whatever, looking for this kind of person. Don't worry about it. So I think that sort of sense of seeing people, like really seeing people, steering them away from judgment of themselves or others, and just having that sort of quite a pure perspective is something that when I met my husband, he's actually my wasband now, but the father of my children, he's in the film industry as well. And when we met, he told me about a book actually called The Continuum Concept by Jean Liedloff. Jean Liedloff went into the Amazon. I think she went there to look for diamonds originally, but she ended up studying communities and children. She saw how incredible the children were and how not only the community took care of them, but also the children took care of each other. And what she really noticed was how much freedom they were given and how much trust in the child's own wisdom was a huge part of this book. And I read it, and it literally, it felt so right. Everything. It wasn't like I was ever thinking like, oh, I'm going to have kids or I'm not going to have kids. It wasn't what I was thinking about. But when I read this book, I thought, oh my God, yeah. I mean, every single aspect of it, for your kids to, find their own boundaries, for us not to be policing them all the time. And one of the, very simple examples was about a candle flame, and you want to say, don't touch that. It's hot, But like the kid puts their hand near the flame and they feel the heat. And they're like, I'm not going to touch that. That feels hot. So they experience something which then gives them the inner understanding that they discovered that boundary, like their wisdom told them about that, rather than being told by someone. So, cultivating this inside out experience for the child from the beginning.
That reminds me of a story my mom loves to tell about me. When I was about 2 years old, in our backyard along the patio area, there were these like lava rocks, like literally rocks made out of lava. They were porous and they were kind of hard and sharp. I guess I used to eat them or try and eat them. And our neighbor, who was a pediatrician, used to come over and say, your daughter's trying to eat these lava rocks. Like, aren't you going to step in? And my mom's like, no, she's going to eat them. And, she's going to figure out that they don't taste very good and that they're sharp. So I'm going to let her do that. And the pediatrician was like, what is going on here? This is crazy. That pediatrician is still my next door neighbor, and they are the best of friends now. And their kids I grew up with, but just very different styles of mothering.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's totally it. To allow them to have their own experience and to explore their own boundaries. And, of course, in a village in the Amazon with, multiple people who are taking care and looking and seeing and all of that, it's very, very different. But I could see the incredible empowerment that was possible through that lens for my children. And also it included, because obviously there's no house with rooms, included co-sleeping and all of the things that just felt to me like, yeah, that just totally makes sense. Why would I need all that stuff? And I think I'd already really explored that within myself, having traveled quite a bit. And, I had a life-changing experience in Thailand I guess it was when I was 28. So that was in the late 80s. I went there and, met a lot of people who were living with nothing, who were really the happiest people that I'd ever met. They had nothing, really, in the hill tribes. And, not to say that it was perfect, but wow, it was just this insight that I had about not needing so much. So that really fitted in when I read the Continuum Concept, because I was like, yeah, I don't need all that stuff. Just buying into that materialism and all these things that we need. So that really, really influenced me, and it was very powerful. My husband, father of my children, we really agreed on that. We agreed that that was really how we wanted to raise our child, which became 3 sons. I was really, really lucky, I think, at the time, like home births and things like that weren't so, not everybody was doing it, but there was this incredible guy called Yehudi Gordon who had a hospital. It was a clinic within a hospital, which wasn't very far away from us. And we went to see him. And that was one of the first kind of birthing centers that was inside of a hospital. And although I didn't end up going to that clinic, which was wonderful, his philosophy was very beautiful. We found these independent midwives. And so that was the way that we went. That was so empowering and so incredible.
So you decided to go with independent midwives. Was it difficult sharing that with family and friends that might have maybe not been familiar with that model of care? My mum had me at home by accident. No, I was born in January and it snowed in England, in Cambridgeshire. She ended up having me at home.
Gosh.
Yeah, and it worked really well. I mean, everything was great. So certainly my mum understood, and I think so, but I was very determined, and also really, I didn't want to read a lot of books. I did read Yehudi Gordon's book, which was very extensive, but I really loved the way that it obviously told you a lot about what could happen, but it also really took you through every single step. And I remember looking at the pictures. Oh, the baby's this big and it's this shape and it's like, and not in a naive way. I just felt like I really wanted this positive experience. There was a hospital not very far, really quite close. So I did have that, that literally it was like 5 minutes away. So that felt good, but I was very clear that that was what I wanted. And my midwives thought there's absolutely no reason why that shouldn't happen. I think it was after my kids were born that people had a problem with how I was raising them or had a difference of opinion. But having them at home, all 3, was so powerful and so amazing.
I think I remember you telling me a little bit about that experience when I first met you out with your horses. So after your sons were born, how did you deal with the difference of opinion? Because when I work with clients now, I feel that there's a lot of judgment and confusion coming from them, and almost like they know what's right for their child, but maybe they're listening to something on the internet or a distant friend that might be an expert, but it's not their experience in parenting or in mothering. How did you reconcile with people having a different opinion about whether it's child rearing or whatever?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that, being a first time mom, I mean, it's so life-changing. Even though I was like, I'm going to carry my baby everywhere and everything's going to be, the same. No, it was life-changing, there's no doubt about it. I think it might be really worth saying I had a really amazing first birth and I had a lot of support in the first month. My mum was there every single day. Father of my kids was there some of the time, but she was really such an anchor. But when she left, when my first son was born, wow, it was a lot, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, I have a baby and I can't send it back. And I'm doing this. I have to do this. I'm doing it. And I think that I had been used to a lot of freedom in my life, which I really value about myself. Is like, if it doesn't feel right, I'm not going to do it. But in this case, it was like, okay, I'm committed. I have had this baby and I'm going to love this baby. And I grieved my other life, the life that I was 30. And I remember sitting on a park bench on Hampstead Heath in the blooming middle of winter. And my baby was, strapped on me on the front, one of those little thingies. And he was asleep and I cried and I wailed. And I was just like, oh my God, yeah, it was just like a portal that my life wasn't just about me anymore, and that I'm the one that's responsible. And even though my husband, was also there, I just knew this is me.
Yeah, it's so interesting that transition because I think people feel so alone
Yeah.
and in that grief, in that death.
The loss of the Maiden.
Yeah, there's not a lot of spaces where we talk about that. That period could be short or it could be really, really long. And I've seen it last a significant amount of time for people. And it makes a lot of sense why, because I think we don't spend a lot of time thinking about that loss.
Yeah. And we may not experience it. Like I have a friend, she's a little older, she's 40, she's just had a baby. Oh my God, it's so beautiful to see because she doesn't have any desire to be doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
She's done a lot. She's just like, oh my God, she is in bliss.
That is kind of the benefit of having a child later in life, I feel like.
Yeah. And for me, it was a time when, I definitely, because of the continuum concept, I was so clear that I wanted to carry my baby, that I was going to be very, that now we know about attachment theory. But for me, that was huge. That was it. I'm going to carry my baby, in those days, I guess it was 92, and I'd been in the film industry and we'd go to dinner parties and I'd sit with a group of people who are my age. I had my baby. Women would like be sitting next to me and they'd say, so what do you do? And I'm like, well, but I was very intimidated by that. I was kind of like, well, I've been in casting. I'm still in casting. I'm still going to work. It was this kind of thing where I'm like, oh my God, I'm not one of them anymore.
Oh, wow.
And I can remember that. Like, what do you do? And I'm just like, I'm in this huge transition where I'm like, what I do is this is what I do, but I didn't have the confidence and the strength or the knowledge to say, this is what I do. And that makes me, it makes me feel emotional because I'm just like, wow, even in that innocence, we're so cut off, even as a culture that another woman or, multiple women, it's not just one, would ask me that question. You're like, wow, we're not even in this sort of continuum where we honor that. We're like, oh my gosh, yeah, you've got a baby. Wow, So I think that was hard. And also, I think that I'd always chosen my friends and I'd always had that freedom. And then all of a sudden, it was like, okay, I need to find women with babies. Mm. And luckily, I'd been to a prenatal yoga class and there was a couple of women there that I thought, I ended up hanging out with them. But basically, it was like, okay, I changed the way. I'm not saying that all of the women that I hung out with, I would not necessarily have hung out with in my other life. Mm-hmm. But we had babies. That was our grounding. And that was something that was really big for me because, I hadn't been social in that kind of way. And it was so wonderful. It was so comforting. It also just took away a lot of my judgment, because I was still in my 30-year-old with probably some judgment. So, once I got over that, I have to find community, it started to grow. And I also chose, to homeschool my kids. So that was another point where I went to a bunch of schools. I really had the idea like, oh, we're, going to go to school. And, I went to try out a few places like a Montessori and this, nice little places, that you go for the morning or whatever, a few hours. And I just sat there and I didn't leave, I wanted to check it all out. And I just felt like, no, it's not what I want, because you're dealing with a bunch of kids. And of course you have to say, don't hit Tommy, it's so innocent, but there is not that connection where what we talked about before is the child discovers their boundaries and learns through interaction and support, learning through experience. And in school, in those kind of schools, I was just saying, no, it's not what I want. So, I mean, going back to your question, where was the kind of rub? That was huge. No, one, I didn't just drop my kid off. And they thought I was weird. Like I stayed there for a week, and I was like, I can do whatever, I can dust books, I can do, So that thing of, like, okay, you can stay. But there were so many times where I think that my confidence grew so much because I was deeply committed to, I think, the well-being of my child, my children. So in that commitment, I learned how to stand up for myself. I learned the hard way. One woman, said, look, it's going to be fine. You just go and don't tell him, he's going to be fine. He'll be playing and you just go. But if you say goodbye, it's going to make it more difficult. So, I thought, all right. So I left him and it was horrible. I'm not saying that, other people couldn't handle that or think that was okay. But I came back and he'd been under the table and he peed his pants. And I was just like, no, I'm just not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. So there were times where, I felt like I was persuaded to do things in a certain way because that's how it's done. I was really clear that I was going to listen to myself in every moment of what felt right to me and be, a commitment to that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I did give up, I tried to do casting for a bit, and take him, and take my oldest now, I'd take him along. And then I was just like, what am I doing? So I was in a position very luckily and very gratefully, my husband was going out to work and I could look after the kids. And then it became more fun because I found community who did want to homeschool their kids. And we did tons of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I was in London, so we were getting in the car and going to science classes and then like pottery. And then, we meeting in the woods and just every day we'd have to think of something to do, but to do that with a group of people and have the kids be interactive and learn. And from the get-go, they were learning about who they were.
Yeah, I want to talk more about this learning through experience, because I think it is so relevant to the work that you do with horses. Specifically, I wanted to talk to you about the idea of space, how we occupy space, and the energy behind how we take up space. I remember you were big on space, and my experience with the horses is the energy that you lead with when you occupy the space that you're in. You can get a wide array of responses from the horses. Can you talk a little bit about this, like the energy of space and the idea of taking up space? And I think it just hearing you talk about being a new mom, even how you occupied space versus how you occupy space now.
Yeah. So with the horses, I work with free roaming horses. So horses that don't have constraints, then there's no halters and ropes and we're not trying to make them do anything. And some of the horses that I work with are wild horses, they're very free. And so if we want to interact with these wild free beings, or even, just regular horses that are free and unhaltered, we need to be aware of our own energy field or space, the space around us, right? You could call it a boundary. And that is, if I'm clear about my boundary, if I'm clear about the space around me that I occupy, for humans, it's about an arm's length away. Literally, if you put your arm out and you think, if someone's walking towards me, where do I want them to stop? Pretty much an arm's length, unless you're intimate. You're like, no, any closer than that is too close. So what we get to experience in this exploration is where our first layer of energy is, where we feel comfortable. And because we're not really used to really thinking about the amount of space we take up energetically, we tend to think that our body is the end of that space. So if we want to be with horses who are free, and a bunch of them, they move each other all the time, And so we need to be aware of that energy field, you could call it, or your boundary. And we learn how to claim that, like to be very clear and direct We can do that with an arm, but, we sometimes use a rope because we're not used to delineating that. The rope doesn't touch the horse, but it's to give us this feeling of expansiveness. When we look at the female horse, the lead mare, which is a lot of what my programs are based on, the lead mare, she's the female horse that leads, she sets the direction for the herd. So in a wild herd, there are, lots of mares, but there is a lead mare. And if there's any danger, anything that they need to run away from, she sets the direction.
Do you still have Yolanda?
Yolanda, yes.
Is she still the lead mare?
She is in a herd here, where I am at the moment, with 12 horses. She is a lead mare. She's not the lead mare now, but she was in that group with 4.
There was only 4, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny you talk about this because she wanted nothing to do with me.
Interesting.
Uh-huh. But the Maiden did.
Yes. Moon.
Moon. Where's Moon?
Moon, she is with a woman in, not Canada, but it's pretty far up there. Yeah, she has a herd of, I think, 6. Moon went to live up there.
Wow. So who's left? Tibby? Do you have Tibby?
I still have Tibby. Tibby's with a different group. This is a big ranch. They have 50 horses here. Bandy's in a group with, as I said, 12 mares and male and female. Tibby's with a bunch of geldings. So they're, male horses who are older because he's 24 now.
Yes. And he was such a gentle giant.
Such a gentleman, yes.
And then he had one other one.
Wycliffe.
Yeah,
and Wycliffe, he's with the small herd that I work with in Malibu. He's one of 3. He's the only man. He has two mares that he hangs out with. But yeah.
I love how they're all so social. Like they're just social creatures.
They're very social and they absolutely want to be in those families. I'm sure that people listening will get the picture. The lead mare, the lead female, is the direction setter. She usually has had a baby or babies, and she's very grounded. She's very sovereign. She's very inclusive, but she doesn't really need to be around a lot of other horses. So she'll be, very exploratory. And the wonderful, amazing thing about her is the reason she is the lead mare is because she feels so safe. She's not reactionary. She expends the least amount of energy. Yeah, she's not like the one that's prancing around telling everyone what to do. She's just chilling, basically. And that energetic field that she's in, that the harmony in that field is what allows her to know when there really is danger. So she really sets the tone for the herd. It's that harmonizing, throughout the family group. As a mother, isn't that beautiful, that we have boundaries? I mean, I don't really call it boundaries because a boundary seems very fixed. It's knowing the space that you take up, which is what I think what you're pointing to. And what's also very powerful about the horses is the neutrality, that it's not personal. They move each other, but they're not saying like, you get out of my space. What they're actually saying is, I want to be in the space you're in, not get out of my space. So the way that kind of translates in terms of being in touch with that energetic field is to create space for ourselves, for our feelings, for what it is that we really intuitively think, what we want to do next, moment to moment. It just creates space for us to have a pause. What do I want to do? How do I want to act? And I think that is very cleverly how you brought it around to the kids, because it really is the same. It is the same. It's like holding that sovereign space within oneself, getting in touch with that sovereign space, that grounded, relaxed beingness, presence. We have a baby, it's built in that they teach us presence. If we have the ability and the, good fortune to be breastfeeding, those endorphins and everything that fills us, it's a soporific state, right? We are in a meditation. If we're trying to be on our phone, the baby's going to be fussy. If we're trying to read a book, no, you can't read a book or be on the phone or anything like that. No, you have to be present. You're present, and that presence, that state of being, if we're not resisting it, is so powerful. And I think that state that we're obviously naturally inner wisdom, our body is telling us this is the state that we need to be in for these first 6 months. Yeah, you got to let go. You got to be in that state. You can't be trying. The minute you try, right, that tension creates disharmony. The baby's fussy, it pukes or, on his shoulder, whatever it is. It's like, oh, well, where's my energy? Where's my tension? And the horses teach us exactly that, because when we are tense around them, they become tense. When people say, like, horses know if you're frightened, you have to pretend. No, horses know when your energy is elevated, when you have tension in your body, and then they will be tense. The minute we take an out breath and relax our body, creating space, their energy relaxes. And if you think about that, the horse is a sentient being, right? It's feeling everything in the environment. It has to, for its survival, it has to know, if the mountain lion is hungry or full and passing by. They read intention. So do babies. Our babies are hardwired. They've lived in our tummies for 9 months. And just like the horses, they reflect everything that we are experiencing. All of our tension, it's crazy, when you think about when they start growing up, and then they start saying no, and, they start having tantrums. And if I can breathe out and be in my grounding and allow these energies to pass through them, right? Their anger, their rage, their, sadness, their hurt, their pain, they fell over, it's like, if we can just be with that and we don't try and say, that's enough now, and, stop that, and you've had enough, it's just like, it passes through, energy passes through. That's the same as the horses. We see that, if there's any tension, a horse chases them off, they immediately release. They do, they do their out breath. They roll on the ground. They shake, their body. They just let go of that energy, that tension. So there's harmony in the field and everybody's safe. And
I have a question about the lead mare. Her neutral energy, is that contingent upon the other beings in the herd? Or is that just her natural state? Like, does her ability to stay neutral and lead, is that contingent upon other beings showing up for her?
No. No, she intrinsically is that. She doesn't fight for that position either. And there are other lead mares kind of like in training. Something could happen, she's going to pass away at some time, an accident or whatever. So yeah, there are other mares, but it's kind of, if you think about it as a vibrational field, like she's the center, as it were, she's the kind of balancer, the self-regulated. Like I said, she maybe has had a couple of babies. She's grounded and solid, and she just is that intrinsically. So all of these other mares, they kind of like learn about that vibration and they get to feel it. And yeah, even if another horse is introduced, yeah, she might have some opinions about that in terms of, actually all about space. Just don't get in my space. You're absolutely fine being here, but don't get in my space. But again, it's not personal. It's just like, if you think about your energetic field, you want it to be calm, right? You want the environment to feel good. And so the ones that are pushed to the outside of the herd, it's only because their frequency is more tense. They're more sensitive, right? And it's fine for them to be there. And of course, they're going to warn the rest of the herd if there's, a pack of coyotes on the hill, because they're going to be, on the edge going like, there's coyotes. And then the lead trickles in to the lead mare, who has the space, the energetic space to feel it. Is this something that I need to respond to or not? Of course, though, at the ones on the outside, the sensitive, more sensitive, they're needed too. Yeah, that's the safety of the herd. Every herd member has a place,
It's like an ecosystem. What about fear? Is it useful at times? I mean, you mentioned the mountain lion. Is it hungry or is it passing through? Like, how does it show up in nature? Are there other layers underneath fear that are worth examining?
Let's just go back to babies for a minute, especially if we're a first time mom. We're going to feel nervous. We're going to be like, oh my God, has he been in the sun? Is he still awake? Is he still asleep? Is he,
Can I go outside with the baby?
yeah, yes. And I think that the thing about it is to be able to ground yourself. Literally, if you don't know what that means, I mean, a lot of people don't know what that means. Really feeling your feet on the ground, relaxing your belly, taking some out breaths and feeling what feels right to you. Just trusting that intuition in every moment, what feels right. Because fear is mostly, especially in our environment where there aren't a lot of mountain lions, it's a thought. Someone told us some terrible story about, someone said, oh my God, you're going to roll over on your baby. You're like, what about all the thousands of people that still do sleep with their babies in different cultures? Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you had a bottle of wine, yeah, maybe you might roll on your baby, but just feel it. What feels right to you? And fear, I would say, in most cases, is a thought. It's not an intuition. When you really feel that it's not right, that's because it's not right for you. Mm. I don't really think about it like that. I feel that we know when things aren't safe because of our intuition. Everything else is a thought.
How do I get my pregnant clients out to your ranch to do like a leading mare workshop, preparing for your baby? I mean, come on. It's beautiful. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like, what is grounding? And some people don't know what that means or haven't experienced that. But I think what you're saying is so true. It's your intuition, and sharpening your intuition, it doesn't fail you, whereas sometimes thoughts do.
For sure. And absolutely, I think that is, when we talk about grounding and we talk about taking a breath out and relaxing your belly, you're getting more in touch with your intuition, because your intuition is not up in your head. Mm-hmm. Your thinking about something is not going to get you through it. You're not going to have an insight through thinking more. So the best thing to do is to create space by breathing out, by having your feet on the ground, by, focusing on your breath and other regulating, maybe your toes in your boots or wiggling your feet, whatever it is, but you're bringing yourself into the present moment through following your breath or through noticing, where's the tension in my body, really simple things like that. And I would say most people that come to work with me, regardless of whether they're coaches, doulas, executives, mothers, we all forget about our grounding. We all forget what that means. And I think the beauty of the horses is you can see why you need to be grounded. Mm-hmm. You look at 15 horses out there in a big pasture and they're all, like moving. Some of them are sleeping, some of them are moving around, and you think, okay, yeah, I need to be relaxed. That's the first thing. How do I do that? How am I going to have my feet on the ground? How am I going to relax my belly? How am I going to take some out breaths, release? And my fear is saying, well, I've never been with horses. Oh my God, they're huge. Oh my God, that one's coming towards me. How can I relax so that I know whether or not I'm safe? Because your intuition is to be found in that place. And I think as mothers, that is so important. And I think it's a beautiful idea, Keely. I think we should do it. Because also here at this ranch, Flag Ranch, there are mother and son pairs. Any mother and daughter? Yes, there's mother and daughter pairs as well. It's so beautiful.
I would so be on board with that idea. That would be amazing, because I think cultivating trust in your intuition is so huge, when you're crossing that threshold into becoming a mother. One other question for you, and this is kind of a general question. If you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing before becoming a mother that would give yourself a little bit more comfort and trust in your intuition, what would you say?
It has two parts. One is let go. And also, nothing stays the same for long. Everything changes so quickly. The thing you're like, oh my God, it's this and he's doing that. It just shifts so quickly and it's over really quickly. Yeah, it's crazy. It feels like it's going to go on forever and everything keeps changing. Everything keeps evolving, keeps growing, you know. Yeah, I think that's what I would tell myself is just trust that, you know, and let go. Huge amount of letting go.
And how old are your babies now?
My babies are 31. My oldest is 31 and he got married in June.
Oh, yes. Congratulations.
My middle son is 30. He's amazing. I mean, they really are extraordinary men. They really are. And my youngest is 28. It's incredible to see them so happy and so individual, living their lives in just really what they wanted. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to look back on that.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you feel called to share? And it's okay if you feel like this is a good place to stop, but I'm wondering, is there anything else pertinent to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that I would say is that, you know, this idea through reading the continuum concept, which I totally would recommend just as a read, you know, allowing the boys to explore their own boundaries. And when I say that, I'll just tell you very, very briefly, like we lived in Sussex and it was near the ocean and there's a lot of cliffs and then there's these huge drops to the ocean. And they're all walking, you know, they're all like running about, you know, they're not toddling, you know, they're used to doing very active things. And I would say that's the cliff edge, you know, we know where the cliff edge is. I would say, if you go near that cliff edge, I am going to throw up. Like I can't handle it. And I said, what I need is for you, you know, if you're going to go anywhere near that edge, you're going to lie down on your bellies. You can look over the edge like that. Rather than me saying to them, like, don't go near the edge, which is like, it's such an expectation. It's like I'm expecting them to go near the edge. Even when I say that, I'm like, wow, that sounds so weird. You know, if I'm saying don't go near the edge, they want to go near the edge because there's an expectation that they're going to go near the edge. I mean, and I would be like, I felt sick, you know, and I was just like, and they would be like, oh, okay. You know, like, oh, poor mum, poor mum, she's scared. Oh, we're not, but we'll lie down on our bellies because she's scared. You know, it's just like, just that little bit of a shift in where the focus is. And I feel like that example is how they are. Like they're so courageous and so loving and so thoughtful about others and everyone around them, but they're also just like passionate about what they want to do and their experience in the world. And I think that is just magic.
Oh, thank you so much for everything you shared and just the meaningful exchange and connection that you have really built from your experience with horses and with nature. And thank you for being a lead mare in my life. So special. And I cannot wait to come visit again. It's been too long.
Yes, I'll really look forward to that, Keely, and for our retreat for mothers.
Oh, that would be amazing. How can people connect with you if you're open for people?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, my website is thereflectivehorse.com. My email is thereflectivehorse@gmail.com. And my Instagram is thereflectivehorse. So any way in those realms is great.
Beautiful. And do you have any upcoming workshops or retreats?
I'm working with private clients a fair amount. I'm available at Away Malibu and also at Flag Ranch, where I am now in Paso Robles. So you're both in California. Yeah, retreats coming up. We're just on the cusp of sort of like the end of this season. So there'll be some other offerings for the winter. Yeah, but you
Beautiful.
can find it on my website.
Thank you again so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share with friends and family and stay tuned for the next episode.